Hello, my name is Edmund Martelli, and I'd like to do a short video on some credibility assessment information analysis. So, early this morning, I was kind of curious and looking at some of the headline news that was out there, and I found this article on higher education and Bernie Sanders. So, in this article, the author Derek Newton, who publishes for Forbes magazine, talks about some of the pitfalls that might be inclusive in an act that Bernie Sanders has proposed. So some of the things he talks about, and I'm just going to go through the website very quickly. He talks about the situation, the current situation, and he talks about this act, this College for All Act, which would basically provide free tuition to higher education. But some of his debates relies on the fact that postgraduate studies accounts for 40% of the student loan debt. In the long term, it's a bad idea. He feels that the states wouldn't distribute the funds from the federal government correctly. He also talks about how some of these student loan debts are for professionals who have MBAs, PhDs, or even higher credentials. He also talks about the fact that it wouldn't really help the economy. The debt cancellation would redistribute wealth, and it really wouldn't trickle through the way it's supposed to. He talks about Pell Grants and loan rates and putting a cap on those. But one of the arguments Sanders has is that he feels like federal government's actually making a profit off of the student loans, when in fact this author, Derek Newton, does not believe that the federal government makes any profit. So he talks about caps, putting caps on it. He also talks about the for-profit companies and how there's a bigger issue there, where these for-profit companies are still sucking up, as he puts it, federal funding. So it's a really well put together argument against this Education for All Act that was proposed in Congress back in 2017. So I wanted to look at this information and dissect some of the credibility of the author, the publisher, and the claims that he makes. So I put together a Word document, and I call it the Credibility Assessment Information Analysis document. Of course, you put your name in here and fill in things like that. So one of the first things I did was what they call a CRAP test, which looks at the article in terms of whether it's current, relevant, authoritative, and accurate, and what purpose it serves. So when I filled this all out, it was a current article. Politics and education are inseparable, so it was a very relevant article. The author, Derek Newton, has been publishing for Forbes since 2018. This is actually a typo. We're going to replace that. 2018. So he's been doing this a few years with Forbes. As far as the accuracy goes, I had to really look into that. So when I looked into that, one of the first things I did, I looked at this author, Derek Newton. Derek Newton, if you go to the Forbes website, some of his archives date back to March of 2018. So he's a relatively newer publisher, writer for Forbes magazine. Then I looked into Forbes themselves. Wikipedia has Forbes here. According to Wikipedia, Forbes has been in business. It's a business journal, a business magazine that has been published since 1917, and it does have global sales. So they're very prominent as far as being a reference or an authoritative type of news syndication. The next thing I did was I looked at the act itself. They call it the College for All Act. And the same date that Bernie Sanders and Representative Pramila Jayapal, the same day that they proposed this bill, this act, they actually published it, Bernie Sanders published it on his U.S. Senator website. So that made it seem a little bit believable, a little bit credible. The next thing I did was I looked it up under congress.gov, and there is a short listing of what the act does. And some of these claims that Derek Newton made against Bernie Sanders' act, they sort of discuss here. So I'll let you listen to this real quick.
There is one summary for S-806. Bill summaries are authored by CRS. Shown here, introduced in Senate, April 3, 2017. College for All Act of 2017. This bill amends the Higher Education Act of 1965, HEA, to establish a grant program to eliminate tuition and required fees, 1, for all students at community colleges and two-year tribal colleges and universities, and 2, for working and middle-class students at four-year public institutions of higher education, IHS. Additionally, the bill amends Title IV, Student Assistance, of the HEA to reauthorize the federal TRIO programs, the Gaining Early Awareness and Readiness for Undergraduate Programs, that is, GARE-UP, and the Federal Work-Study Program for FY 2018-FY 2027. Eliminate existing base guarantees of federal work-study funds to IHS and require funds to be allocated based solely on the aggregate need of the institution's students. Modify the interest rate formulas for federal student loans to revise applicable rates on new loans disbursed on or after July 1, 2017. And allow student loan borrowers to modify interest rates on outstanding federal student loans to current rates. Finally, it directs the Department of Education to use any excess revenue generated by the Federal Direct Loan Program to carry out the federal Pell Grant Program.
So, in my critique, let me get back to the crap analysis. The purpose of this article was to expose the weaknesses for the College for All Act proposed by Senator Bernie Sanders. But some of the claims over here, I've got a different table. I call it the credibility determination. The author, of course, was Derek Newton. Publisher was Forbes magazine, which we already know. These two are relatively credible sources. But some of the claims here are bulleted right here, and they include states will prohibit. Mr. Newton feels as though states would prohibit federal funds from reaching schools. 40% of the student loan debt is from professional degrees, who are people that can pay back and give back to the economy. Federal caps on interest rates are not correlated to huge profits to government, so there's no factual basis on that. Eliminating student loan debt serves no financial motivation. Underserved populations would not benefit from cost reductions, and for-profit schools already divert needed funds away from non-profit schools. So, with that being said, I felt that the article did have some genuine claims that were being made about this new act that Bernie Sanders proposed. Especially if you look back at the website, they really want to revise the interest rate, and they want to shift funds up to the the needs of the institution. So, with the claims made by Mr. Newton, I really feel like he has some valid arguments based on economics that this bill would not work as intended, or at least as Bernie Sanders might put it on his political platform. So I did feel it was a genuine article. My confidence level for rating that is about a 9, based on the facts that I could pull out from this case. Next, I put together what they call a credibility summary, and I just kind of summarized what I found about this article and the research behind it. So I'll read this aloud real quick. Again, without the College for All Act being in effect, speculation is at best. Although the author has performed and followed political platforms and emerging topics in higher education, this article is a mere critique of how the act might affect higher education. The composite score on the CRAP test was a 92%. This was due to the fact that the article is from a reputable publisher and the author specializes in higher education news. The topic has celerity as well, being as education is regulated in many forms from government funding. It is important to debate possible realities, but until the experience occurs, this article remains as speculatory. So basically what I'm saying is, though, although this is a very valid argument, and although the federal act, the act that Bernie Sanders has proposed, has some innovative ideas to revise the interest rate and redirect funding, I feel as though Derek Newton does have some valid claims, and he is a credible author who works for Forbes. So I would say that this is a fairly credible article. Thank you for your time.